Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for being a part of this. And I am so excited. I've got a guy named David Hayward, who is also on Instagram and other places known as the NakedPastor. He is actually fully clothed right now, but
Hey,
and
that's right. Yeah.
David, and I've been following David for a good probably 3 or 4 years, just loving his cartoons that he posts. And yeah, I finally just thought I'm going to reach out and see if he'll do a podcast with me. So thank you, David, for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to be here. Nice to meet you.
I always like starting out, if you don't mind, with just a little bit of your background. And we've been chatting offline a little bit here, and found out that we have very similar roots with the
Yeah.
vineyard movement and some of the
Yeah.
renewal movements that happened in the 90s. Tell us where you were born, where you grew up, kind of your family faith origin, your maybe some of your spiritual journey as well. Just give people a context for who you are,
Sure.
your background.
Sure. First of all, hi everyone, and thanks for having me on your show too. I was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and grew up in a Christian home. My mom and dad were born again at a Billy Graham crusade before I came along, and we grew up all around Ontario. My dad was a provincial police officer, and so we moved around quite a bit. So we weren't faithful to any one denomination. I was baptized Anglican. That's what my dad, he moved from England. And so we were Anglican. I was Anglican by birth, but we moved through all different kinds of denominations. I call myself my own ecumenical movement because I've been in so many different churches. And we ended up going to a Baptist church, and then we ended up going Pentecostal. And then I ended up going to a Pentecostal Bible college in Springfield, Missouri from Canada.
Wow. Did you go to what was the name of that one?
Central Bible
Central.
College.
Yeah, that's like the AG headquarters.
Central, which was the conservative one, and then there was Evangel, which was considered the liberal one.
Okay. They're very Evangel's even like fundamentalist in my
Oh
opinion.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, you went to either
That
the
just goes to show you how conservative we were. The place I went. Wow.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. And that's where I met my wife, Lisa. After that, I make a long story short, I ended up going to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, got my master's in New Testament studies. I ended up getting ordained in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and then spent about 12 years ministering there. And then I ended up
Kind of Presbyterian was that? In is there just one Canadian Presbyterian, or how is that
pretty much,
compared
yeah,
to?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It'd be a sister organization to the PCUSA.
So more progressive than
Yes.
like, yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then we uh, we left the Presbyterian Church in about 1995, and I ended up getting invited to pastor a vineyard church here.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I became a pastor of a vineyard church here in '96, and then I served that church basically. There's other details, but basically, long story short, I served that congregation till about 2010 when I left the ministry. And then I'd already started my blog, Naked Pastor, in 95. And I decided to focus on Naked Pastor when I left the ministry in 2010, see if I could, not 95, 2005. I started the blog Naked Pastor. And so I decided to focus on Naked Pastor and see if I could make it a full-time gig. And I did. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. Was
Yeah.
Gary Best the overseer of the vineyard when you were pastoring a
Yeah.
vineyard church? Yeah.
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 Oh man. Did you ever meet David
Yeah.
Parker? I'm just David Parker
No,
was not he's not Canadian, but he was connected to he spoke in a lot of churches in England and Canada and stuff during the
I don't
Can't say
remember
prophet
that.
era.
Funny.
Yeah. All right. Wow. So many. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it takes me down a rabbit hole of my past, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I knew some British guys. So like there was like Graham Cook and others
Did you know?
from England.
Did you know the Mumfords, John and Eleanor Mumford, and
I think I met them, but I didn't know them. I came in kind of late. And then, um, we we never really got to hang out.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, John was overseeing the vineyard in Britain, and his son is
that's right.
Marcus Mumford of Mumford and Sons. He grew up
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
vineyard in England and all that. So yeah. Well, cool. Well, so I was reading, your website and some of the other things about you, and
Right.
one site said that maybe you were the originator of the word deconstruction as it relates to people questioning their faith or having doubts and stuff. And evidently, you were reading Derrida, and you
Hmm.
were you ended up give us a tell us about your deconstruction, if you will, if that's an okay
Yeah.
word to use, and how do you use
Yeah.
that, and how did it apply to you?
So in while I was still in the ministry in the Vineyard Church, Gary Best actually called for in the Maritimes here, where I live, Eastern Canada, a meeting of pastors, vineyard pastors, for a weekend workshop, and he brought in a theologian, um, a biblical theologian, and we were given a bunch of textbooks, theological books to read to do with hermeneutics, and a lot of them were critiquing Jacques Derrida's um, deconstruction theory that basically you question everything right down to the very roots. Every text, everything is you question everything, and you can't say with certainty objective truth about any text, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, more conservative theological um, thinking would be cautious about deconstruction because it does depend on the text meaning something and having objective truth and so on. But it had the reverse effect on me. I actually became very fascinated with deconstruction theory because it seemed to articulate exactly what I was experiencing in my own spiritual journey at that time, where I was questioning everything, including the text, and not just the text, but the whole weight that it brought, like the three I's, inspired, uh, infallible, and inerrant. Those things were I was questioning those things at a very deep and fundamental level. So I really resonated with the whole deconstruction thing. So I started using that word to sort of describe my my spiritual struggle at that time with the Bible and with the church and with even our thoughts about God and everything. Like I was questioning everything. And people were actually saying, "You sound like a deconstructionist." And I was like, "Well, I hate to admit it, but I could be." It really resonated with me. And so I started using that word. This was back in 2008 and stuff, 2009, 2010. And then when I left the ministry, Um, I I realized just how many other people were in the same position I was. And so I actually started an online community that's still going to this day, The Lasting Supper, where I welcome people who are deconstructing their faith and their beliefs and their relationship to the church. And it became, a thing. People talking about deconstruction as it refers to their belief and their faith. And so I think I was the first one to use it in this way, and some people have pointed that out, including people who disagree vehemently with deconstruction and warn people about deconstruction. A lot of them point to me as the one who started all this. But my claim is that deconstruction's always been going on ever since humanity had a brain.
Right.
And we've always questioned our what we believe, or at least we should.
Yes.
And so it's just become a thing where we talk about it more openly, and people now don't feel as obliged or pressured to keep subscribing to orthodox beliefs and traditional church values and things like that. So I think that's why deconstruction has become so much talked about out there is that people feel more free to question and take steps in accordance with what their beliefs are or aren't.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I was always a reader, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, still, like N.T. Wright would have been one of my favorite, theologians. But more still conservative, kind of, but a thoughtful conservative, that kind of thing. So I think that's what I was, and I was, we had women pastors, and I was really wrestling with the LGBTQ plus issue because the vineyard wasn't open and affirming.
Right.
Um, and so
Still
I had always pastored that crowd, but my
uh,
own world, I ended up going through, my marriage wasn't healthy, and I ended up going through a real personal crisis through insomnia. Ended up late in life getting addicted, trying to deal with an insomnia issue to Xanax, and then my marriage crumbled, and a lot
mhm.
of that was my fault. And then the failure of my own failures that led
Right.
me to a really dark place where it didn't even feel like God existed to me.
Right.
And then that darkness, it caused me to question everything I'd ever believed about everything. And I mean, got a bachelor's from Baylor, a master's of divinity from um, Southwestern Baptist Seminary, a doctor of ministry from Fuller, and I was just completing a PhD in the Hebrew Bible as well. And then I felt like God didn't even exist. And I mean, that was the feeling. I never actually called myself an atheist, but I felt like one. And then I
Yeah.
questioned everything like one. And
Yeah.
I'd always believed in evolution as well. So that was, and then I'd pastor LGBTQ people, and that all of that together, plus all,
Right.
yeah, just melted me down to my core. And then a friend sent me a Richard Rohr book, Falling
Hmm.
Upward, and I started reading everybody Richard footnoted, which led me to the process theology. That was the only way I could end up hanging on to God was with that process theology or philosophy lens. I don't, I'm sure you're familiar with
Yeah.
kind of all of that.
Whitehead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whitehead, Hartshorn, and then all the modern day John Cobb and Trip Fuller and Tom Ward and that whole crowd is kind of who I hang with
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, your deconstruction sounded like it centered around the Bible,
Mhm.
the text of the Bible. Is that accurate? Was that where your
Yeah. Well, I can
questions
remember the
started
moment.
coming in?
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember the exact moment when deconstruction took hold. And that was when I was graduating from seminary. I'd already completed all my courses. I was actually getting my graduation robe on to go to the ceremony for graduation. I'd studied under Dr. Gordon Fee,
Yeah.
famous Testament scholar.
Yeah, I know him. And then Mark Fee,
Yeah,
his son as well, wasn't he there
yeah,
as well? Yeah.
yeah. So, and he was my mentor and everything. And but I had some time in between my studies and finishing up all my research and everything and papers and exams and the graduation. And so I picked up a book down at Harvard Coop in a bookstore there by James Breach called The Silence of Jesus, and it destroyed. Like up to that point, I was totally over my head in biblical studies. Like I BA in Bible and theology, my master's in New Testament studies. I took years of biblical Greek. I took years of biblical Hebrew. I even took a year of Aramaic. And I was preparing to do my PhD at Toronto University. I actually started my PhD in New Testament there, and with theological French and theological German. Like I was headed to be a Bible scholar, but I read this book and it totally flipped the script for me. I suddenly found myself questioning
Hmm.
the inspiration of the Bible.
Mhm.
And I was just a young man at the time, 25 years old maybe, and it was like a corrupt line of code got inserted into my theological brain, and it just started its work.
Wow.
And it took decades. It took literally decades of me going through ministry and everything to finally come out the other end of that,
Hmm.
um, where I'm totally at peace theologically about the whole thing. But it took decades to get there. But that was what introduced deconstruction into my life, was me doubting the inspiration of Scripture, because everything I believed was founded upon the Bible. And so if the foundations crumble, what's left, right? So intuitively, I knew that if the foundations crumble, everything crumbles.
Hmm.
And it took me a long, long, long time to work through that. Yeah.
Wow. When you were at Toronto University, did you run across a guy named Peter Gentry?
Oh, the name rings a bell. Yeah.
Canadian, super good Greek and Hebrew scholar, but very conservative guy. But he's a
Hmm.
real brilliant linguist, you know. But anyway, so describe for me, because you say it took a long time to process through all of this.
Yeah.
Tell me about the emotional components to that, because I'm just curious. Like I know for me, it just, oh my God, the emotional side of it
Hmm.
was hard. Like is going, it felt like grief and loss and all these kinds of things. I'm just curious how, and
Excuse me.
you were married. Was your wife going through all of that at the same time?
Um,
Because I know she had a book out on the marriage side of all of that. Or
yeah.
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 So yeah,
Till doubt do us part. Yeah.
out to his part.
Name of my book, Until Doubt Do Us
I
Part.
saw that.
I have several books out, but that one is on marriage and deconstructing.
Now,
Yeah.
9 books, some of them cartoons, drawings, some of them are letters from, well, even letters from your community that you led, the Lasting Supper. I was looking at all
Yeah.
online. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
But yeah, emotionally, how did that
this is my
unfold
fifth
for you?
one. This is actually my 12th one coming out, The Rainbow Sheep. It's my children's book that's coming out next month.
Sweet.
So
Everybody on that's watching on YouTube, check that out. The Rainbow Sheep. David
it's a
Hayward.
children's book, and it's LGBTQIA friendly, of course. It's about the rainbow sheep, which is one of my most popular characters, in my cartoons.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can pre-order that now on wherever books are sold. But Lisa and I, we met in a Pentecostal Bible college, so we were very much on the same page, and that never really changed. We traveled pretty much joined at the hip all the way through the ministry and everything. Um, it wasn't until 2009. So we're talking, I graduated in uh, 1987, I think it was. And that's when this crisis happened. So we're talking 97, 107, 17. We're talking 20, 30 years of me deconstructing while in the ministry.
Yeah.
And so it was I I know some people who deconstruct overnight. It's like, I was duped, I'm done, and they walk away. For me, I couldn't do that personally, because I felt that what I had experienced up to this point, even though, some things could be questioned, it still felt like there was something there for me. Like the Bible, even though I was questioning the inspiration of Scripture and infallibility and inerrancy and all that kind of thing, I still felt the Bible had value somehow. And so I wasn't willing to chuck it all. Neither was I willing to deny that the questions that I was being confronted with. And so I remember Karl Barth, the Swiss theologian, um, saying the way you deal with a theological problem is not by skirting around it or, going over it or around. You got to go through it. And so I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure this out. And so I always gravitated toward churches where I felt I could explore. And I never approached ministry as hierarchical, like top down. I'm a minister, you're the listeners. I always assumed that we would all be traveling together, and I could continue my growth and exploration as a spiritual person, and they could too, and that we would walk together, with one another. And so I was fortunate to be able to pastor churches like that where I felt free to continue my search and my journey.
Hmm.
And I'm telling you, there were times when I was theologically exhausted and confused and just so much angst because I couldn't figure out how to reconcile all these different parts, like the Bible with my faith, and is there a God? And I was looking into Buddhism and Judaism and Islam and Zen and atheism and science and quantum physics. Like I just everywhere, just searching, searching, searching for some kind of a missing link that could pull it all together. And then in 2009, when I was about to throw in the towel, literally, I was literally ready to throw in the towel and say, that's it, I give up. And I had this sort of a moment one afternoon where I just saw this picture of a waterfall in my mind. Like, I'm not saying it was a vision or anything, but I just saw in my mind this picture of a waterfall, and I saw the oneness of all things in this picture, and that were there, even though there's different perspectives on reality, there's only one reality. And it was such a powerful, powerful unifying moment for me. And it was like my theological angst was suddenly put to rest. It was like I suddenly felt peace of mind that I've been searching for all these years, and it hasn't gone away. It's real, it's permanent, and I, I just felt this incredible peace come over my mind, and it was done. It was almost like a 10,000 piece puzzle. And it was like the final, it made no sense, but the final piece got put in and it all came together.
Hmm.
That's what it felt like.
Interesting.
And yeah, profound moment happened in March of 2009. And I started naively sharing that in my blog, Naked Pastor blog, about my experience and talking about all this stuff and everything. And it was a year later when I left the ministry. I felt it was people couldn't understand where I was coming from and wondered. A lot of people felt I'd left the faith and I'd lost my calling and all this kind of thing. And it was about a year later that it was a year later that I left the ministry in March 2010.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
You know how when sometimes through, like I just finished a 2 year mindful meditation training with Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. They come out of the Vipassana
Okay.
Buddhist tradition. So I'm a certified mindful meditation teacher now, I've been pastoring again for a couple of years as well in a progressive disciple of Christ church. But
Hmm.
I've interviewed several people who have through meditation, they have that experience where their ego kind of dissolves and they feel connected to everything. And then people on mushroom trips have had a similar experience. So when I hear you describing yours, it it does. Did you have that sense of your own ego dissolve, or was it just more of a sense of your own self being completely connected to I'm sure you've read about those kinds of
Oh
experiences.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Did
yeah,
did it equate to any of those, or was it different? I'm just y-
yeah. Well, yeah,
your own
absolutely.
experience. How did it compare to some of those others that you've heard of that are along those
So
lines?
for me, it was like uh, a unifying experience. I felt at one with all things, and it where I felt the most comfort was in my mind. It was like the turmoil of my theological searching, and it was kind of like the koan, the Buddhist koan or the Zen koan. What's the sound of two hands clapping, for example? There's no answer, but then finally, it's not an answer, but the solution or the resolution comes, and it's like and
Mm.
that's what I felt was that unifying moment. But I knew that even though it was all taking place inside of me, this sense of oneness and union with all things, and that even though there's a million interpretations of what's going on, there's only one reality. And I felt this incredible peace, but I knew that this is going to take a while for to trickle out into my everyday life. I knew that it was going to take time for me to integrate this with my body, for example, and with me at life in the world. But my mind, when it comes to theology and the spiritual things and all that, complete peace. Now, how to live that complete peace from day to day, that's another thing. But that's a journey I'm on. And so, for example, for me, I spent so many years in my head. Now, my spiritual discipline is to just be present in my body. And that for me is my spiritual challenge right now, is getting out of my head and just being present, being here now.
Mm.
And that's what my spiritual challenge is at this time. But it's a practical application of what that flash of insight, right?
Yeah.
It's the practical application of that for me is taking time.
Yeah, that's so
But
that's
also I have had a mushroom experience.
yeah, yeah.
One.
Yeah.
And
Was it
I'm
was
a
it a guided one? Was it guided or was it just on your own?
it was guided by somebody very close to me,
Okay.
but we went hiking in Zion National Park actually, and all my kids were like, "Dad, you got to do mushrooms." And I'd never done mushrooms, and I was waiting for the perfect time, and I thought, yeah, that would be a perfect time to try that. And the person guiding and doing this with me, um, so do you have any expectations or hopes? And I said, you know what I think is going to happen is I'm going to experience and see and feel exactly what I felt at that moment in 2009. It's just going to be a confirmation of that. That's what I feel. And that's exactly what it was. I just felt at one with all things, everything, including the trees and the leaves and the rocks and the stream and everything. And the person, the people, just this incredible depth of unity and union with all things.
Hmm.
And so that, like they say, I'm a one and done. It was like I have no desire or need to do that again because I know exactly, you know, it was such a deep that thing that happened to me here in my home, that flash of insight had such a deep impact on my life that it was permanent. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's an awakening.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in a way. Yeah. Awakening for
Yeah,
sure.
sure. So in your were you always a cartoonist, an artist, as you were in the depths of your theological days and your seminary days? Were you always drawing on the side, cartooning on the side, or was that something that emerged out of this experience of deconstruction?
I grew up in a home where there was art. My dad was a painter on the side. He was, like I said before, he was a policeman as in his career, but he painted on the side. And so I was always around art. There was always art hanging in our home. So I learned how to paint and draw early. And, I always did well in art class and school and everything like that. And I would paint on the side. And, even after we got married, I would paint paintings for our home or to give gifts. And I did a couple shows and I would sell paintings in different galleries and stuff like that. But it was kind of like a side hustle. And then in it was around 2005 or six where I thought, I've been blogging as a naked pastor, writing articles, posts, and I thought I'm going to try cartooning, see what happens. And boy, did it ever take off. So they say pictures worth a thousand words, and I love the speed of impact that cartoons can have, especially one frame, few words as possible, and the impact that that can have in a split second versus having to read a 1,000 word post kind of a thing. And my cartoons just they're going all around the world. They're shared everywhere, and it became what Naked Pastor is most known for.
It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
just there's so many times I just pause and just like use them as a little reflection moment, or a meditation moment or something. It's just
Cool.
it's just really beautiful. I love it. And the themes, I've been following you for a while now. So like one of the themes that well, for me, I think I spiritual abuse,
Yes.
abuse of authority is one of your big themes. Your critique of purity culture,
Mhm.
your and then you're aligned, you're an ally with the LGBTQ plus community. Those are some of the ones that I've, really picked up on a lot. I know there's other themes that you work in, but what are the top three or four themes that you're always working through your cartoons and drawings, and maybe make a few comments on spiritual abuse and what you're trying to help people
Yeah.
with there, and then especially with the purity culture stuff as well. Oh, good. So because
Yeah.
your cartoons are helping people um, think through things that they're struggling with, right? And
Mhm.
give some lightness to it. At the same time, there's a depth to it. I think. I don't know. It's an
Yeah.
interesting combo of how those cartoons impact people, I think.
Thank you. Well, I think you hit on the big ones. Women is a big one. Feminism, um, LGBTQIA for sure. Um, and spiritual abuse for sure, the abuse of authority. Um, what I'm seeing now more and more is that these are all linked to the attempt by, okay, I might as well just come out and say it. I really do believe it's an attempt by white male supremacy to keep control of everything, including women's bodies and so on. So, so for an example, like in the United States there, uh, when it was announced that uh, LGB was allowed, but not T and Q. And I thought, well, that's weird. What's wrong with T and Q? And then it made sense. It's because the T and the Q challenge the binary of male and female. And because being trans, challenges the binary. And then being queer, of course, challenges the binary as well. You can be gay because the binary is still in place. You can be bi because the binary is still in place. And so, and then also what we're seeing too is, and we're not just seeing it in the United States, we're seeing it everywhere where there's a, a, a right wing attempt to pull us back into the past where men are in control of women's bodies and every other sphere of life for everyone. And so I'm finding that the cartoons that upset people the most, it's also my cartoons have a double edge to them, right? Where they can either really encourage people or they really, really offend people and make people
Right.
angry. And,
Yes.
and it's because it's challenging that hierarchy, the patriarchy. So my feminist cartoons obviously upset the patriarchy. My trans cartoons, when I post a trans cartoon, I just know I'm going to get hated on that day like no other. It's just horrendous. And feminist cartoons, of course, and then spiritual abuse, which basically is the abuse of power, um, and people feeling that they have the authority to control people. So those are the big themes that I'm hitting on. They're very, substantial themes and political too. So but I think they get close to the nerve of what's going on in the world, and what's going on in the church and what's going on in the lives of people. And so I think when we are seeing more and more progress in terms of trans rights and gay rights and women's choice and autonomy, bodily autonomy, and things like that, or when you challenge patriarchal theology or things like that, then you're going to not only encourage and affirm people who are on that side, but you're going to really anger people who are trying to maintain the status quo. So, one of my cartoons where there's women um, and they're with the men disciples, and the men say, "Well, thank you, women, for reporting the resurrection, and we'll take it from here." Like, I love that cartoon. It's funny and it's true. But it really, really makes people angry when you point that out. And so
I
I
think
think those are
I need to use that on my Easter sermon this coming
it's
April
an
20th.
Easter cartoon. It's an Easter cartoon. Yeah, so you got to use
I
that one.
need to
Yeah.
do that one. Sam, remind me. We're both part-time, but he does the worship. So,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Pastor.
So I make my cartoons digitally available for churches on my site, so you can download a good quality copy of it. I
Hmm.
just did one recently too, where Jesus is talking to the woman at the well. You know that story. And so I showed Jesus talking to the woman at the well, and there's a bunch of men disciples there. And then I titled it Jesus at the Well, actually. Maybe maybe you don't get it, but actually is usually the way a man
Well,
introduces his thoughts to correct a woman.
uh,
So well,
mansplaining,
yeah,
mansplaining,
well,
right? Hmm.
woman at the well, actually.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So
Isn't it
I'm trying
fun
to
to flip some of those things and
yeah,
bring out a new angle that kind of, attack. You know what you're really doing, David, is the principalities and powers that we used to think were demons that we needed to cast out are really systemic injustices that have been ingrained in the system. I think Walter Wink was right in that it's systemic
Yeah.
injustice, and you're trying to prophetically with cartoons like attack
Yeah.
those
Well,
systems of
Walter Wink,
injustice.
Walter Wink has had a profound influence in my life, as well as, have you ever heard of William Stringfellow?
I've heard him, but I haven't read him. I've read
Yeah.
Wink, but I've read Wink's series on the powers. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And William Stringfellow also wrote about the principalities and powers, and he he was published a lot. He published essays in Sojourner magazine,
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
and he's been gone a while, but his book, An Ethic for Christians and Other Aliens Living in a Strange Land, it's quite a title,
That's a good title.
but that's in my top 10 most influential books of all time.
Okay,
And he
interesting.
talks about the principalities and powers in that book. And so that's influenced me in going after the systemic problems in the church and in our societies and cultures and politics and everything. It's all linked. Like, I'm not being a conspiracy theorist or anything, but the religion, in my opinion, and the abuse or the patriarchy that goes on in religion is an extension of the human struggle. And religion just employs its theology and Bible or scriptures or whatever to wield that weapon.
Mm.
So the patriarchy is not unique to religion. It's common in culture and in our society, and religion is just one of the tools that it uses to exact its, authority.
Yeah, I mean, just if you go back historically, it's hard to find matriarchal societies. They have found some, I think, but
Mhm.
you know, anthropologists have, but
Yep.
yeah, it's largely a history of patriarchy is our modern history of
Yep.
civilization and Homo sapiens and all that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny, I was just breathing the air and I was one of those white dudes and I built a big mega church and, didn't, I mean, I was always wanting people to follow Jesus and, walk in his ways and lots of grace, but I didn't see some of the, I was blind to some of that stuff. I was breathing the air and didn't critique it very well in my own being. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh, I know what you
it
mean.
got
Absolutely.
woven into my psyche at a young age, I think, and it's been
Well, it's like Bell Hooks. The book I'm just reading now, as I said earlier, Feminist Theory. We learn about this in our families where there's uh, an authority figure, the father, that everybody serves, including the mother, and how authority and control is managed in that home over groups. And so we learn that in our family structure, and we grow up and go to school and all that, and it's further entrenched in us, that how authority works, so it begins in the home. And we can be uh complicit even as victims because we've been socialized and conditioned to accept this as normal. Um, I remember years ago reading, while I was a pastor, reading The Lucifer Effect, written by Zimbardo. He was the one who did this prison experiment in the university, where some students were the prison guards and some students were the prisoners, and they had to shut down. This was in which university starts with an S in California, famous.
Stanford.
Anyway, Stanford University, and they had to shut it down in just like 1 or 2 days because the prison guards became abusive and the prisoners were being abused, and it was became horrible. And he ended up writing a whole book on it called The Lucifer Effect, where perfectly good person. Now, these were all healthy students. Were all pre-examined. Everything, they were fine emotionally, mentally, intellectually. Everything was fine. And then it degraded like overnight. And he asked that question, how can good people become so, do bad things in such situation? And he talked about systemic evil. And he ended up becoming a key witness and expert witness in Abu Ghraib cases, where good soldiers would become extremely abusive to the prisoners there, and it had a powerful impact on me as a pastor because I realized suddenly my eyes were opened that I'm participating in systemic evil in this system we call church, because there's just so many assumptions about who's in power and who's in control and who has authority and who does not.
Mhm.
And it was a really eye-opening experience and changed the way I did ministry after that.
Wow, wow. Is it Kristen Dumez's book, Jesus and John Wayne? Uh,
Right?
that one basically she basically walked through my whole experience of growing up as a Southern Baptist evangelical in the 70s, and coming to Christ.
Yeah,
I came to Christ in 77 as a 16.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
smoking weed and got saved and felt called to be a pastor, and so
There you
and then
go.
all of the experiences, the Bill Gothard, and she just goes through and
Yeah,
just dismantles, I think, white patriarchy and its negative impacts and the abuse that's tied up into that. And of course, it's the history of the church for the largest part. If you just study church history for over 2,000 years, it's yeah,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah. Well, my goodness, um, what the trans thing.
Uh-huh.
I started pastoring this small church a couple of years ago, and we have some trans people in the church, and it's been I mean, it's like you said about your cartoons that are trans friendly. It seems like the new, in America anyway, it seems like the new people to persecute now.
Yeah,
Obviously, we've got a white patriarchal dude on steroids trying to take over the world. It seems like
yeah,
the whole world bow to him
yeah,
right now, and including our long term Canadian friends who
yeah.
like it's
But
just
it's
bizarre. I mean,
ongoing.
it's like the zenith of I've never seen anything like this in America before, and even though it's all been going on, but it's just like
Yeah,
steroids now. It's just
yeah. It's
unbelievable.
disturbing, upsetting for sure because we're um, my wife is American and I'm Canadian. We get along great. Um, we have free trade going on all the time. And we have, our kids are dual and we travel back and forth. But I can't travel, the Canadian government's issuing warnings to Canadians traveling to the States, don't go right now because of arbitrary detainment and et cetera, right? And I know they are looking through your phones or for anything negative about the president, and they would have a heyday with my accounts, so I won't be going to the States anytime soon. So but the trans thing, yeah, it's like let's pick on them, 1% of the population or 1.6% of the population, let's pick on them. And it's sad. Like for me, um, somebody many people admire said justice is like the sun and like the rain, it falls on everyone indiscriminately. And I think that's what love is. I think love is the same. It's like the sun, it doesn't discriminate. Like the rain, it doesn't discriminate. It's like gravity, it doesn't discriminate. I think that's what true love is. It's not based on choice or preference or, you know, ability or appealability or, affection or anything like that. It's indiscriminate. And it's like the sower and the seed. It just casts a seed, it goes everywhere. I think that's what love is.
Mm,
And so to say, yeah, love everybody except trans people is a it betrays an epic misunderstanding of what love is.
mm,
And so that's why I talk about it so much is it's like if this is where they've chosen to draw the battle line, that's where I'll go to fight because like I said, it shows a very critical misunderstanding of what love is.
mm.
And so that's I'll continue to fight that fight for sure.
I love that. I love the love.
Love the
Um,
love.
yeah. No, I mean, even at my darkest moment when I was like questioning everything and even the existence of God, I was like, well, I still believe in love. I've experienced that. I still believe in beauty. I've experienced that. I still believe in creativity and, and some of these things that I know I've experienced as a human. I'm like, well, I'm just going to call those things God and just press into those values the rest of my life. And um, so that's kind of what led me into the more the process theology metaphysics, because unconditional love is kind of how we describe God, So, my
Yeah,
atheist friends can say, yeah, well, that's semantics. And I'm like, yeah, that's okay with me. As long as we're all pressing into love and beauty and creativity and trying to push forward a more equal, diverse, just world.
yeah,
That
yeah.
I think we can find partners all over the place.
Absolutely. I mean, I have an inner believer, but I also have an inner atheist and an inner agnostic and an inner Buddhist and an inner Muslim, inner Christian, inner, whatever. It's like the river I live on. It's called the Kennebecasis River. I I could go down to that river right now and scoop up a cup of it and say that's the Kennebecasis River, but that's true, but it's not entirely true. And the Kennebecasis River out there is vast. It's wide and it's very deep. And it's made up of all kinds of streams and rivers and rains and melts and so on. It's made up of many, many things. And I think that's a good metaphor for me and for you. Like I have many streams going through me. Like I've I've studied Buddhism and Islam and Christianity and Judaism and quantum physics and all these things, and they all feel true to me on one level. So why not?
Yeah.
You know? And it's like I said, like there's a million, as many people as there are interpretations of reality, but there's only one reality. And I think that's where we all are.
Mm,
We're in reality with our different interpretations and explanations and applications and all these kinds of things. And I think if we focus on
mm,
that unity and make that our default position, and then figure out how to unite with one another on a more practical day-to-day level, I think we'd be far better off rather than trying to get everybody to believe in exactly the same way we do.
yeah.
There's a million thoughts, there's a million words. It's like your friend said, that's just semantics, but that's all like flack.
Mhm.
The meat of the matter is the core of the matter is that we're one, we're united on a deep and fundamental level.
Yeah.
And if we can assume that, I think we'd be living far more peaceful lives in a far more peaceful world.
Mm. Yeah, man, there's so many ways I go here, but we're getting running out of time. But the one of the things in doing the mindful meditation is,
Hmm.
we do our most ancient part of our brain, the amygdala, has this negativity bias because it's the fight, flight, freeze, survival part of our brain, right?
Right.
But then you take a young kid and you throw on top of that like these conservative doctrines from, say, like the Catholic Church or even my evangelical roots, where this kid is a dirty rotten sinner. If we don't get him baptized, he's going to burn in hell for all eternity. And you wrap
Yeah.
that kind of theology around a kid. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
And then what I realized that we all end up then emerging with, like, especially Southern Baptists and Catholics seem to emerge with some of the most critical inner critics that I've ever seen. And like a part of mindful meditation has been trying to heal people from that with self-compassion, self-love, self-care, those things, learning to trust themselves and their personal agency, not
Hmm.
having to turn that over to like the white patriarch person who's telling you what to believe and how to act. And
Yeah.
the purity culture, how it plays into that. I bought into a sexual ethic that said, God created sex and it's good, but if as long as you're in a heterosexual marriage, but if you're not in a heterosexual marriage, you can't do it and you can't think about it. And it basically puts the whole of humanity into shame about something they shouldn't be shameful about, which is their own humanity and sexuality. So I love the critique that you do on the purity culture stuff from that angle as well. Gosh, that's so much fun. You've got a lot of humor in your purity culture critiques, and some
I
of your
know.
some of your bed. You've got a partner in bed, and they're
So I'm telling you though, it's getting harder, however, because more difficult. Because when I started those a couple years ago, I could draw, a couple in bed or whatever. But it was always discreet. I never showed, any genitalia or nipples or anything like that. But it, the internet is getting more like Meta, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok is getting more, uh, it's getting stricter so that my cartoons are getting taken down because it's showing a sexual act or whatever when it's just a couple in bed. They might only even be talking, but because they're in bed and I don't know, like,
wow.
uh, so it's getting more and more challenging. But I think I almost have enough to put a book together on purity culture cartoons. So I'll have fun with that.
I'm gonna buy that one and pass it around.
Yeah, it'll be fun because there will be some that didn't make it onto the internet or got taken down, so not suitable for work.
Wow. Well, David, thank you for your journey. And I, I was reading something that you said. I can't remember. Maybe I heard it, but you were talking about how, you know, I, I still have a lot of evangelical followers because I pastored one of the largest churches in Kansas City, and the courage to keep putting yourself out there, critiquing these principalities and powers. And you said, I see you as a very courageous person, but you were talking about how internally you can still struggle with the rejection, the criticism, and all of that kind of stuff. Give us a little window into that part, and that maybe we'll wrap up with. I appreciate your
Yeah.
courage, is my point, and I'm just curious the inner workings of that in your own heart, because I know if you pastored all the churches that you did, I know you've got to have a love for people and a tender heart, and yet you're putting yourself out there to be criticized like
Hmm.
intensely, right? And
Yeah.
I see that as such a courageous thing that you're doing. I appreciate it and thank you for it. But maybe help us other people help. How do I
Okay.
become more courageous, you know?
Um, so you can't have courage unless you're afraid. So um, if you weren't afraid, it wouldn't be courageous. There's this fellow, young man who is a solo rock climber that free climbs, like no ropes or nothing. And he'll do these amazing vertical climbs, and one slip and you're dead, right? This guy is, everybody was amazed at how fearless he was, he's still alive, but like just like unbelievable. Well, they did a test on him and came to discover that the part of your brain that issues fear of danger is underdeveloped in him.
Wow.
So he's not afraid.
Isn't that interesting?
It doesn't take courage if you're not afraid. He just does, right? And so for me though, I am afraid. Like I do get scared because I get some really, really nasty hate mail and messages and stuff like that. And I know people are going to get upset and whatever. So for me, it's just like, it's kind of like Obama said one time when he was getting a lot of kickback when he was a senator. He was like, he just put his head down and say, it's about the work. It's about the work.
Mm.
And just keep doing the work because you're helping people. Just keep doing the work. So that's what I do. It's like, just do the work, press send, and then worry about what's going to happen. And so it's not like I'm a brave guy or a courageous guy or anything like that. It's just like it's about the work and helping people. I know I'm helping people, so I'm gonna just keep doing this. And it yeah, it's just a matter of putting my head down and doing the work.
Well, thank you for it. I've been blessed by it, and I was so I was actually surprised that you responded when because I didn't have your contact info. I think I sent you a message on Instagram I DM'd you on Instagram, and I was just so surprised.
Yeah, no, I answer everything. And anybody who reaches out to me, I respond to.
Wow.
So
Thank you.
yeah,
Well, thank you
yeah,
for being
pleasure.
on
Thank
our
you.
podcast, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, I uh, I want everybody. You've got a website, nakedpastor.com.
Yep.
Um,
One word, nakedpastor.com. Yep.
pastor.com. And then if you go to Amazon or however, you can go to your website and pick your books up there. Um,
No,
or
I don't sell my books.
okay,
They're sold through bookstores.
okay,
So yeah, that's the best way the only way to get my books is.
okay.
And so, for example, this book that's coming out, The Rainbow Sheep, anywhere books are sold, you'll be able to order that there. But yeah, but nakedpastor.com. I'm also Naked Pastor across all the different platforms, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, I'm there. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Blue Sky, Threads, all over the place. I'm like, I'm everywhere. But and I do respond to people when they reach out to me.
That's great. Thank you, David. Thanks for your heart, your work, and all that.
Thanks so much, man.
And a
Good
blessing.
hanging out. You
Yeah.
too.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures, and we'll see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.